How can someone live off the asset value of the equity tied up in the properties they own throughout their retirement and still retain ownership of them too? Sound a bit like a have my cake and eat it issue? Well, it isn't. And in this presentation, I aim to explain something that has been mulling around in the back of my mind for about a year now. I kind of knew it was possible, but only recently, while attending an online training, have I seen exactly what I had in mind explained clearly. So this is that idea explained in terms that I can relate to, and which will hopefully be of interest to other people. To set the scene, in 2019, I bought a 2-bedroomed end-of-terrace property in Carlisle. It was a mess. So I only paid £68,000 for it. £20,000 worth of refurbishment plus legals all added up to £91,000. It was then revalued at £120,000 and remortgaged, raising £89,500 back into my bank account. So I now have a property that has cost me £1,500. I handed that property over to my serviced accommodation company, and in the first 12 months of operation, during most of 2020, yes, in the midst of COVID, it averaged a monthly cash flow to me of £314. That's £3,768 in the full year. So for a £1,500 investment, that's a staggering 250% return on investment. Now, not every investment is going to return those sorts of percentage ROI results. But for my first Carlisle property, let's just say I'm not disappointed. And that during the year of COVID, I don't think is at all disappointing. Also remember, the service accommodation costs I mentioned include the management company charges. So that's hands-off income to me. Also, because it is serviced accommodation, it's not subject to any Section 24 issues. Being hands-off, I can now go and concentrate on the next project. And indeed, as of early 2021, I now have 5 properties in Carlisle area. Some are serviced accommodation, some are buy-to-lets on assured short-hold tenancies. Rounded down a bit for simplicity of numbers, the total market value of those is £500,000. They're all on 75% loan-to-value interest-only mortgages. So the mortgages total £375,000, and I own £125,000 worth of equity. In general, on average and over the long term, you've heard those caveats about property before, I'm sure. House prices trend upwards. Why? Well, because they're a scarce resource. We live on an already overpopulated set of islands, and new homes are not being built fast enough to satisfy demand. So the long-term trend is for the value next year to be a bit more than it was last year. And it will be a bit more the year after, and a bit more the year after that, and so on. But how much more? Well, taking the Northwest region from the Nationwide House Prices Index, link here at the bottom, it shows a historic 7% growth. The lowest region of all being Scotland, where I also invest, has recorded a 6.4% year-on-year average since 1973, and these include the 1990s and 2008. So being cautious, rather than 7% or 6.4%, I'm going to base this example on a 5% assumed annual growth figure. So in this simplified and smoothed out example, we get 225,000 at the end of year 1, 551,000 at the end of year 2, 579 after year 3 and 608 after year 4. At the historic 7%, we get to exceed 600,000 after just 2 3/4 years. But if we hit a dull period, then it might take over 5 years. That doesn't matter. This is not a calendar date prediction. Just follow the principle. So again, let us be a little cautious and say after 4 years, it's got to 600,000. In that time, all my mortgage interest costs have been paid, and I've been getting an income on top from the guests in the service accommodation units and the tenants in the buy-to-let properties as well. I now still have mortgages of £375,000, but my equity has therefore leapt to 225,000. So I can go to my friendly building society or bank and say, the value of my properties has increased. Can I have a further advance? And they say, can you afford it? I say, well, the management company that runs my SA units have steadily increased their prices in line with inflation, and my income has gone up as a result. And the lettings agent that runs my buy-to-lets has increased the rents 3 to 5% annually. So yes, I can. The building society will then lend me 75% of the new valuations. So the mortgages go up to 75% of 600,000, which is 450, which means my equity shrinks to 150,000. But look, I still have an additional £25,000 more in equity than I started with. And the building society have dropped a whopping great £75,000 lump sum into my bank account, tax-free. Notice the tax-free bit, I've highlighted it in yellow. No income tax to pay, no capital gains to pay, tax-free. So what am I going to do with that 75,000? Well, one option would be to buy more houses. And then I can hand them to my serviced accommodation management company to get me even further annual income and let the capital growth start on those as well. The other option, which I will eventually take, and is the main point of this video, is that I could retire. Mortgage lenders will happily lend or further advance on proven and performing properties, especially where they're being managed and operated by professional agents rather than the retired owner. So this can be repeated again and again throughout retirement with very little effort. Finally, to tie up a loose end or two, where did I get the initial money from? Yes, I did have to find the money to buy the property in the first place. The £20,000 to refurbish it, I borrowed from a personal contact and paid them a fee. In this case, it was 5% of the amount borrowed, the £20,000, over 12 months. But as I got all that back when I remortgaged, I was able to repay them. And strangely enough, they were reluctant to take the money back, preferring instead for me to use it on the next project. Is that where I'm stopping? Well, no, I'm actively building my portfolio, so I'm constantly looking for other people with funds to lend for fees in order to do refurbishments, and I have an ongoing funnel of available properties which I can help other people to buy and then operate on their behalf as serviced accommodation units as well. Do I have to wait for the lump sum every 4 years? Well, no. I could do this process more frequently and get smaller amounts each time, if the market allows. But there are some legal costs to consider, which are the same each time you do it. So doing it too often isn't practical. Once the value has gone up, about 20% seems to be a reasonable point. Also, I can remortgage each of the properties at a different time and still produce the average of almost £20,000 a year. Hands off, no involvement on my part, tax-free. And remember, this is in addition to my earned income that I get from my serviced accommodation properties and from the property income that I get from my buy-to-lets. So regardless of which tax bracket I'm in from those two streams of income, these mortgage amounts are still tax-free. Finally, I'd like to express my appreciation to Aaron Curry of the Insight Group for clarifying my thinking on a principle that underlies a key component of this presentation. Your guidance is much appreciated, Aaron.